Welcome to the Becoming Body Smart podcast, where we unlock the secrets of sustainable health and fitness and help you master your health habits. If you're tired of quick fixes, generic blueprints, and chasing short-term results, you're in the right place. It's time to become body smart.
Or really many other supplements, but the evidence behind creatine is growing that it is really a helpful thing for lots of areas of our body, including recovery, muscle performance, and brain health. So, that being said, let's dive in and talk about those different areas so we can explore why that is a good supplement for us to be taking. So, brain health is kind of one of the newer avenues that I don't think they'd really studied before, because this was mostly a muscle thing. This was mostly something that weightlifters took to maintain their gains and to improve their recovery so that they could train better, more effectively. And so I don't know that they'd established the link to brain health until just recently. But especially in women, it seems to be that dementia rates among users of creatine seem to decline. That there is a reduction in risk of dementia with taking creatine. So, yeah, any thoughts there, Mark? Any thoughts, evidence that you want to review?
Yeah, so I think it would be good just to talk about like what creatine actually does in the body. And
for sure.
so we have a number of different energy systems, right? You've heard us talk about how our body uses fat and how our body uses carbohydrate to fuel energy, right? To be able to work and to move and do the things that we want to do. But there's actually another system called our PCR system, right? Phosphocreatine system. And so that can actually provide some of the energy in addition to what carbohydrates and fats are providing, especially like quick energy. And so we store a certain amount of creatine in our muscles, but we can take supplemental creatine, and that actually increases creatine stores in our muscles. And some of the more recent evidence has looked at creatine in the brain as well. And so our brains are very, very energy hungry, right? We've talked about this before, but they use about 20% of our daily calories, even though they make only about 2% of our weight, right? And so anything that we can do to like fuel the brain better and to keep that constant supply coming, the better. And so when we have more of that readily available energy that's just in storage form, right, when we're taking supplemental creatine, then the more the body can kind of shift where the energy is coming from, what energy it's using. And so it can kind of preference certain forms of energy so that we're just more efficient as a whole. And so what they've found is that particularly in the brain, so they found, let me look at the specific thing. So with that, they found that cognitive processing, right? Basically how efficiently and how quickly is my brain running, right? Is it running like there's a bunch of tabs open, or is it like,
hey, what's wrong with having tabs open?
Hey, if you have the processing power, right? I guess it's not such a bad thing. But that especially in cases of sleep deprivation or really exhaustive physical or mental activities, that's really where we see the creatine supplementation shine through in terms of mental health. And there's actually been some recent evidence about enhancing recovery from mild traumatic brain injury. And so really some really interesting and some promising data in terms of that. So I'm going to go to Lori's question real quick. Is there a best time of day to take it? Also, do you just take the dose on the container, or should it be based on body weight? And so the studies have shown that it doesn't really matter what time of day you take it. Your body, like, you just kind of develop up the stores of it over time. And so there's different recommendations, right? Some people recommend you do a loading phase of 10 grams of creatine a day for 2 weeks. Others just suggest 5 grams. And honestly, like, it all comes out in the wash. It's not going to make a big difference long term. And with taking the higher loading phases, there can be some gastric issues, right? Like tummy troubles and stuff. And so I typically recommend just taking 5 grams a day. And it doesn't matter what time of day you
Right. So some people have tummy troubles with it anyway, even just starting at the 5 milligram dose or 5 gram dose. Initially, or 5 milliliter. No, what is it? 5 gram? Yeah, 5 grams. Yeah, yeah. Five. Yeah. So the 5 gram dose. Some people still have a little bit of stomach upset when they start it. It's one of those things that you get used to pretty soon. Not used to the stomach upset, but your body gets used to it and it stops causing stomach upset. Um, and so yeah, the loading phase, kind of what I've seen there is it doesn't matter at all. It helps it the levels come up for those 2 weeks, but like Mark said, long term, it doesn't really matter. You're about the same levels 3 weeks in either way, and so it really isn't making a big difference. It's more about just being consistent with taking it, so those levels in your body stay up enough uh, to get the benefits of
Yeah. Um, Other things I'd say. So Cameron and I are really careful about recommending any supplements, right? Like, there's not very many on our short list. Um, and that's because we tend to do best, right? Getting our nutrients, getting our energy from whole food sources. But creatine is one of those ones that's been very, very, very thoroughly researched. There's 30 plus years of research behind it, and from multiple labs, multiple studies, and just really good data. And in terms of benefits, and in terms of like very, very minimal risk. Um, there was some concern for people with like kidney issues, but in the long term research, that really hasn't borne out, and so it seems to be very
it.
safe
Right.
and very effective. They do recommend like
If you're not taking horse doses of it, you should be fine.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
If you're not taking horse doses, that's the thing. And so yeah, you will want to drink more water along with it because it actually draws some water in with it into the muscle cell. And so it's just a good idea to drink a little bit of extra water, but we should just be drinking lots of water anyway. And I'll be like Cameron and be thoroughly, thoroughly hydrated. We'll leave it at that.
And that's how I get my steps in, Mark.
It's
That's
true.
how I get my steps in.
So many steps, so many steps. And oh, the other thing that I wanted to talk to was the kind, right? Does it matter what kind? There's a couple of different ones. So the most common is just creatine monohydrate. That one is the most thoroughly researched, the most effective. There's a couple other versions. So there's creatine ethyl ester. There's also creatine hydrochloride, and some other ones as well. But typically, they either they cost more and are the same effectiveness, or they cost more and they're less effective. Oh, there you go. I got my little thumbs up from iOS. And the I believe it's the creatine hydrochloride mixes a little bit better. So just creatine doesn't mix super great with water. It ends up being a little bit gritty still, but it's such a small dose that it's easy to just swallow down. Or you can mix it with a protein shake and take it that way as well.
And you don't notice it at all.
And you don't notice
so
it,
it's pretty flavorless.
yeah.
So I honestly just take it in a small glass of water, dump it in, stir it, drink it, and it's like probably 8 ounces, 6 to 8 ounces of water, and it's fast enough that I don't even notice it. And then I just go to my mug and chug a big thing. So you can really mix it in with any drink as well, whatever your favorite, morning beverages or evening beverages. And it mixes in fine, and it doesn't seem to majorly affect the flavor unless you have one like Mark's that is the watermelon something
Oh,
flavor.
sour watermelon, so good, so good.
Yeah, yeah. So I just do a flavorless one so I can put it in whatever. Mark loves his sour watermelon one.
I do.
Um,
The flavorless one, the unflavored one, is a little bit cheaper, and so that's the thing. One other thing to be aware of. So there's another form you'll see more commonly now, creatine gummies. I honestly haven't looked a lot into that. I don't see there being really a big difference in absorption between creatine gummies and taking it in the powder form. But there are a lot of different supplement companies selling this stuff. And the thing to know about that is like the FDA does not regulate supplements. And so there's sometimes questions of like purity and content. And so a lot of the, like I've seen some of the companies selling the gummies for pretty cheap, but they're coming out of other countries, and they're not like third party tested. And so any supplement, it's always good to have it like, has it been third party tested for like purity and content? Just because, especially in things coming from outside the U.S., there tends to be they tend to be adulterated with other substances, some of which are innocuous, but some of which are not great, right? Like if you're an athlete, you might test positive on a drug screen.
Right. Well, and you're getting a bunch of stuff that's not on the label, which is never ideal. And you're often not getting what is on the label. And so you just have to be careful there. Do some homework as to the quality of it and things like that. Yeah, I think that's important with any supplement that you like check the sourcing. Um, so Lori's other question about body, should it be based on body weight? The only times that I've seen that recommendation that you like alter that 5 gram dose is if you do have any kidney function problems, you may want to alter the dose and check in with your doctor on, for those reasons. Um, if you have kidney specifically, but I'd say kidney or liver function problems, it's probably best before taking any supplement to check in. Um, but that being said, you'd have to have pretty compromised kidneys for that to matter. But that's the only instance where I've seen them altering the dose for somebody. Um, yeah. Anyway, so I just want to make sure we answered both parts of that question. I mean, we mentioned dosage, but specifically based on body weight, they seem to recommend that same dosage for everybody. It's because it's not about you wind up avoiding the excess. It's just making sure that you maintain a certain level of the creatine in your system so that you have it available for recovery.
Absolutely. Um, so let's talk. Let me see what's next on the list.
So we talked brain health, and then we wanted to chat about muscle development, right?
Yes. Yep.
So let's talk about how it helps muscles.
Those muscles. So
Mm-hmm.
what matters for so as we've talked about before, for improving muscle strength, what matters is intensity. Can I lift at a really high load so that not only my muscles get that tension signal, but also my nervous system, right? It learns how to move in such a way to lift those heavy loads in an efficient and economic way. And then for hypertrophy, volume is king, right? Can I just get a lot of load in over time, such that it stimulates my muscles to grow? But in both cases, we want to follow the principle of progressive overload, right? Progressive overload is over time, can I increase how much that I'm doing in terms of intensity, in terms of frequency, right? Sets, reps, things like that. Can I increase in that over time in a graded way such that I'm lifting more and more over time? And so in both strength and muscle growth, we care about progressive overload. And so going back to what the creatine does, right? That PCR system, that creatine that's stored in our muscles can be used for quick energy. And the nice thing is that it can fuel high intensity exercise that's for shorter periods of time, and it can also be like when we have those larger stores, it can be resynthesized pretty quickly, right? During those rest periods between our lifts. And so in being able to lift at a higher intensity, if we just have more so what let me go back a little bit. For high intensity exercise, we need a lot of the body's energy currency, right? The body's energy currency is ATP. And so for really high intensity efforts, we need a lot of that really quick to fuel those efforts. Otherwise, we fatigue out really quick. So fat is a really great ATP fuel source. We can get a lot of ATP per unit of fat, but it's a lot slower, right? And so for moderate intensity exercises, right, I'm going on a long run, it's a really great system to have producing a lot of ATP, but it's just not quick. Carbohydrate, relatively quickly. PCR, right, that creatine system, super quick. And so for those really high intensity efforts, if we can just if we're storing more ATP, or if we're storing more creatine within our muscles, then that means we can get more of that quick energy currency out, and that allows us to fuel higher intensity exercise efforts. Um, so not only does it allow us to fuel higher intensity overall, but it allows us to fuel that higher intensity a little bit longer, and it's resynthesized fairly quickly. And so when we have regular creatine supplementation, it's been shown to increase our stores by about 30% or so, up to about 30% or so. And so that just means that that allows us to do more intensity, which is important for strength. That also is going to allow us to do a little bit more volume before we fatigue. And so that's also going to be a better signal that we get for muscle growth. And so in terms of both strength and muscle growth, it's shown to have really positive effects there. And for as you increase the duration of the exercise and reduce the intensity, it doesn't matter quite as much. But especially, again, strength sports, sprinting sports, it's going to have a much greater effect. But then, if we're not doing a lot of those types of things, as we talked about before, there still seem to be really positive effects in terms of brain health. And so it's not just about muscle and power and strength and those things, although that is an important part of what it does. But it really seems to have positive effects throughout our body, systemically. Anything to add?
Well, and no, not really. So as you talk about ATP and CPK and some of these acronyms, the P in all of them is phosphorus, like so phosphocreatine, or ATP is a adenosine triphosphate. So that's a big thing that we're tracking through the energy systems, is how that phosphate group of molecules is being passed around to generate energy, essentially. And so that's what the creatine is really helping to do, is make that phosphate more available so it can be kicked around for energy usage. Is that a fair way of putting it? The
Yeah.
citric acid cycle and
It's
all
all
these other things, we're just kicking around phosphate
trading
groups.
phosphates around. Yep.
Yeah, and so the more of those we have in storage form, essentially, the more it can just keep going through these cycles and being reused as energy. And so when we're too low in those, then we don't have as much energy for you know re- repair and replenishment, as well as use during exercise. And so being able to have that energy store on board, that quick energy form like that then winds up getting used to utilize all of our energy systems as well. Um, that's why it's such quick energies. It's in its most ready form to change shape, to let off the chemical reaction that is the energy needed to make the muscles move and whatever. And so I it's I guess it takes a lot of kind of science background to understand how all that goes. But that's essentially what we're targeting and why creatine matters. Um, I don't know. I hate to get too nerdy with it, but I want to draw pictures. So I was just looking on the phone, like re-looking at the chemical structure of carbs and fats and how both of them are made of the same materials. But a carbohydrate is called a carb or a carbohydrate because it's hydrated carbon chains, versus meaning it has more hydrogen ions. It has more carbons in the chain than a fat molecule. Still has carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, so they're made of the same thing. It just doesn't have as many carbons in that chain. And so because of that, it's a little slower to break apart because the oxygen bonds hold things together more, whereas the carbohydrate is a looser bond and is more easily broken apart. And so those the creatine and the phosphates that they're bound to and stuff like that, they're really easily broken. And so that's essentially how those different energy systems work, is it's as those bonds break and bind with the phosphate group and all those fun things, they release energy as part of those processes. And fat has a ton of energy potential, but it's harder to break those bonds, so it's a little bit slower. Carbohydrates are quite a bit quicker to release those bonds, and so they don't have as much energy, but they're faster to use. And then the phosphates really fast to use, really easy to break, but burn up really quickly as well.
Yeah.
I hope that makes some sense as to what, like, the difference between why we need those different energy systems.
One way that I've heard it explained that I really liked is looking at it like I'm building a campfire. So your
Yes, yes.
phosphocreatine is your match, right? We strike that, lights really quick, but also burns out really quick. Your carbohydrate is like the kindling. It's got a little bit more energy, but it lights on fire really quick, right? So we can get it burning quickly. And then our fats are that big log, right? So we've got to do the other stuff to get that log started, and then that log can burn for forever, right? And
A
so
big oak log, yeah.
a big oak log, right? Like that'll burn for ages. And so, kind of looking at our energy systems in our body like that, right? Creatine is the match, carbs is the kindling, and then fat as that oak log. Kind of gives you an
Right.
idea of how much energy is stored, but also how quickly we can access the energy stored in those materials, right?
Yeah, I love that analogy. I've heard that as well, and I forgot to use that analogy. That's a good one.
Forgot to
Because
remember.
imagine trying to keep yeah, well, imagine trying to keep a fire going all night with just kind of like thumb size sticks, right? That the sticks that diameter, you'd be doing a lot of work to get more sticks. And that's essentially what zone 3 exercise is you're burning kindling the whole time. So that's why there's supplemental nutrition for runs and things like that. Why people are taking goo packets and whatever. You're just burning kindling. Whereas if you can train your body to burn, a bunch of big oak logs, you can go for a lot longer. So the tricky part is the kindling burns hotter, right? But it won't burn for as long. So to train your body to get as much work done, to generate as much heat energy, if you will, out of the big oak logs, you kind of need a bigger furnace. And that's what doing the zone 2 slow, steady training is all about. And then the high intensity training is all about building a bigger furnace. And then you can fit more of those big oak logs in there and you can generate plenty of heat. But if you're just running on carbs, you don't need a very big furnace to generate a lot of heat. You just have to keep feeding it fuel the whole time. And so that's the big difference. You may need a little bit bigger furnace, which we earn with consistency of exercise and polarizing our training. But then you create a bigger furnace for burning that fuel, and you can burn the long, slow fuel instead. So
Absolutely.
there you go.
Yeah,
Extending that analogy into where rubber meets the road with our exercise.
for sure. One of the other reasons this is important is because we're always trying to balance the stimulus, right, to get stronger, to get faster, or whatever, with fatigue, right, and recovery is respecting that balance. And so, if we're only ever burning carbohydrate, like carbohydrate creates more metabolic byproduct, which is more stressful on our systems over the long term. Um, and so when we can offload some of that work to our fat burning system or to that PCR system, that just means that we're not dumping as much fatigue into the equation, and so we can recover a little bit better as well. Because that's what we're always trying to do. How can I optimize recovery? How can I get the maximum stimulus with the minimum amount of fatigue, right? And trying to find the
Mm-hmm.
the, the balance of that equation. And so that's like one thing that creatine can help with is that it just gives us a little more of that quick energy, that doesn't create like fatiguing byproduct and as much. And so we are relying less on carbs while we also work to get that fat burning system more online, if that makes sense. And so,
Yeah.
uh, again, looking at creatine, so like we talked about, helpful in brain health, especially in cases of sleep deprivation, or really physically or mentally demanding tasks. Can help us, especially in strength sports or in speed sports, right, where we need that quick energy for high intensity activities, and then it's just helping us balance out that recovery equation, right? That stimulus to fatigue. And again, super well studied, super safe, and just one of the, like, for me, it's like whole foods, right? If you can, supplemental protein as needed, and then creatine are kind of, those are top tier. Other supplements, there's just, most supplements don't have the robust amount of research behind them like protein and creatine do. They may help, eke out those couple of top percentage points, but overall, like, a lot of them, you're just getting really expensive pee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Expensive is probably the worst outcome. Not all of them are harmful. There are some consequences to some supplements, but it's a lot of cost for very little gain often, and especially you can't counteract with the gain that you get out of some supplements the maybe negative behaviors that we're doing. And so focus on those behaviors first, and usually the need for that supplement goes away. So that's the idea, is lead the healthy, active lifestyle, and most supplements become not as necessary. But creatine is one that actually there's some evidence behind why that really can be a helpful thing, especially if you're exercising regularly, and something that really helps us recover better, helps our muscle health as well as helps our brain. And so brain recovery as well as brain health. So that's pretty awesome. If we can do those things, everybody wants a sharper brain longer in our life, and to be able to recover better from brain insults. And heaven knows, none of us always get quality sleep. So if it can help in sleep deprivation or in strenuous tasks mentally, I want some of that. So anyway, creatine does get kind of our thumbs up. So as not to promote any one brand or anything, we haven't dropped like which ones we promote, or not promote, but we use, or things like that. But if you have questions about a good supplement to take, as we kind of alluded, that be careful which ones you're taking, reach out to us individually, and we'd be happy to point you in the direction of kind of the ones that we're taking, the brands that we trust and like, and where good places are to go to shop for that. Yeah, reach out, and we'd be happy to answer those questions. Yeah, any other questions before we roll? Thanks so much for joining us on the call tonight. And yeah, if you do have additional questions about creatine, let us know.
Thanks for listening to the Becoming Body Smart podcast. If you have questions, thoughts, or want to continue the conversation, reach out to us on our socials or join our community. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps us bring you even more valuable content. Remember, sustainable health is a lifelong journey, and we're here to support you every step of the way. Live longer, live stronger, and become body smart.